Everyone, I'm Kathy Palmer, the Executive Director for the Travel and Tourism Research Association. Welcome to today's webinar, Using Geolocation Data for Tourism Growth, presented by our partner, NEAR. TTRA unites university academics, professional practitioners, and research experts, the best and the brightest from the travel and tourism research community. If you're not a member, I encourage you to join us. You can learn more at ttra.com. Before we introduce today's guest speaker, I want to remind everyone we're using the Zoom webinar platform, so please drop your questions into the Q&A and we'll get to as many as we can before the end of the session. Now I would like to introduce today's presenter, Kelsey Waite. Kelsey is NEAR's Director of Destination Sales and has been involved in the tourism industry for nearly a decade. In her role at NEAR, she focuses on building relationships with tourism organizations across North America. Thank you, Kelsey.
Hi, thanks, Kathy, so much for having me, and good afternoon to everyone, and I guess good morning. We're all in different time zones, but so happy to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. So a little bit about NEAR before I get into the nitty-gritty about mobile location data and how we can use it for tourism. I just wanted to make sure that we highlight why you should trust what I have to say and kind of why we are here at TTRA and are so proud to be a member. So first of all, we are trusted by over 300 destinations across the world. And this is between our direct relationships with DMOs and then our valued partners. So you can see all of the people we work with at the bottom, and then we work with so many more destinations. And why use NEAR in general? So we help tourism bureaus and DMOs figure out where people are coming from, what they're doing when they're in your destination, and who those visitors are, more than just, we know that they came from Indianapolis. We can get even more granular and into who they are as individuals in terms of their interests and demographics and all sorts of fun information. So I promised the last piece about NEAR. We are a full stack provider of data intelligence, and we have research solutions that cross all departments of an organization, including marketing, sales, advocacy, and partner community engagement. As the largest source of mobile location data, we enable analysts, data scientists, and tourism researchers to better understand tourists' behavior. So the main topics for today that I will go over is, one, what to look for in geolocation data sources, if it's NEAR or anyone else, why use location data, the process of using geolocation data, and then what does it look like in real life? So I'm really excited to show several different use cases and real-time case studies that we have done in the tourism space. So before we get into all of those pieces, it is important to kind of talk about what is geolocation data. For us, it starts with data collected as GPS pings from opted-in smartphone apps. So millions of points of data are gathered per second from all over the world and from hundreds of thousands of apps that NEAR gets data on. NEAR then cleanses those data points for the highest quality, because nobody wants data in the middle of the ocean, and no one can trust a device that is seen going 1,000,000 miles an hour across the globe. And then once we filtered those erroneous data points out, we use the remaining refined data to power our visitation patterns, visitor origins, and traveler profiles. So now we get into the good stuff. So what to look for in geolocation data sources. Again, this is anyone that you're talking to. I'm trying to get that information, seeing if it's going to work for your destination or your research projects. So first, you want to make sure your source is privacy focused. So not only for the US, but that they have global data and then therefore are GDPR and CCPA compliant. For For example, we are compliant by using Optin Data only. We do location services on the app and not on the cell phone, and we take measures to make sure that they are of age and consent to having that data looked at. Number 2 is transparency and methodology. You want to make sure that whatever source you're using, you can ask questions like, where did this data come from? How are you measuring this data set? You want to make sure that they are open and honest with you. Even if they can't give you all the secret sauces, they at least have some white papers and some more background for you to look into. Number 3, we want to focus on quality data, not only quantity. So it is important that you get lots of data. As the higher a sample size, the better always, but you don't want it to have multiple pings from the same device in 4 different countries at the same time. You want to make sure that it's coming from reputable apps and different sources that clean the data, and then also the company cleans it even beyond that. You want to make sure that the data itself is demographically representative. So getting sources from all over the world, like number 5, you want to make sure that you are getting apps that are used not just in North America. You want to make sure that the devices seen are also globally too. And then number 6, you want to make sure that the data is gathered from a large variety of sources. So again, for example, NEAR gets data from hundreds of thousands of apps. And again, all across the world, we have apps that are only used in Australia, but we want to make sure that we're collecting it from as many places as possible. And then why use geolocation data at all? Some really good question, and I know a question that a lot of people are asking right now. So why to use it? So there are 5 main reasons, in my opinion, why you would use it. So the first one would be to remove common survey biases. Looking at the sample sizes that mobile data can create, it would typically require thousands of dollars to generate using a boots on the ground style survey. We love those kinds of surveys, and we think that geolocation data is a wonderful piece to append to that, because survey takers, I mean, we've all taken a survey at some point where it's like, oh yeah, of course I visited the cultural center and the museum, when really you went shopping and went to the amusement park. So you want to make sure that the data is there to back up what you're finding in your surveys. And especially because every data collection method has its biases, and so being able to tie in multiple sources together really tells that full story. And then providing data where there are no alternatives. Especially in the tourism space, we do have CRMs, but we don't have the largest population of all tourists. You have the people who've signed up for your newsletter, you have people who've sent you RFPs for conferences and events and group business, but that obviously is not going to be every traveler in North America, let alone the world. And so being able to look at mobile location data is wonderful, because you don't have to have them sign up for some sort of newsletter or program, and it takes away that, that human touch piece of it, but while still being opt-in on the apps. The third one would be allowing analysis beyond anecdotes. I know that literally everyone on this call has at one point had a stakeholder say, your conventions and events don't bring any visitors to my business, or people who go to our historical sites will never go to an amusement park. And then of course, the best one is, your marketing isn't benefiting me at all. So with mobile location data, you actually will have the answers and not just opinions to guide your business decisions and your responses to your stakeholders. Number 4 would be to supply insights into competitors. Everyone wants to know what's going on down the street, what's going on in a destination similar to yours on the other side of the country. And with mobile location data, you can gain insights into how other cities were impacted by events or conferences that you are debating on bidding for? Is it worth bidding on? Should we be giving all of these concessions if there weren't a whole lot of out of market visitors when it was in Chicago last, just an example. And then you can also see the types of people who go to your destination versus a competitive destination, and just in general, where travelers to your location are also going. And then of course, answering questions about tourism trends in your destination specifically. And now for the process. So how to use the data, how are we actually getting the data for your location, for your questions? First, we geofence the study area or location. This can be your whole destination, it can be MSA, your central business district, a whole county, whatever it is that you are wanting to look at on a wide scale, but then we can also look at certain points of interest. So if there is a downtown square that you want to look at, or a convention center. This example here is a beach in Waikiki. We can really customize any kind of point of interest and be able to select then a time frame when you are looking for the data. I just recently ran a report for the Indianapolis 500 because I went, and of course I'm just a curious person. So I was able to select that whole weekend and be very specific. And I then ran some data sets and then extracted the audience and looked to see how far people were traveling to the Indianapolis 500, what types of people visited, where they were most likely to go before and after. And so really fun being able to pull those data sets. And most importantly, after we run all of the data, then you can ask questions and find those answers. And again, that's the who are our visitors, where are they coming from, what are they doing once they are in our market. And now the piece I'm so excited about is being able to show some of our case studies and what this data can show destinations and researchers in real life. So our first one is a real life customer use case. So we asked Cochise County and Pinal County in Arizona what they were doing with our dashboard and our data sets. And some of the questions were, how did rising gas prices affect drive destinations to those counties? Who was visiting and what did they do while they were visiting? And then the last question was, how should they target marketing for maximum ROI, which is what everyone wants to know, right? So with using geolocation data, they were able to see that in the spring of 2022, road trips to those counties outpaced pre-pandemic levels, even despite the high gas prices. When they looked at 20 points of interest, they actually decided to target ads to markets including Los Angeles and Dallas, ones that they hadn't thought of before. And then Cochise County attracted over 1,000 visitors from 36 states to a road cycling event by targeting cycling enthusiasts. So actually using the data to target advertisements to people who are interested in cycling. And it really worked out if they got people from 36 different states. Another one that we did was for emerging trends in Australian tourism. What we did for this case study was we looked at 4 different locations that are considered tourist destinations in Australia. We looked at Byron Bay, Cairns, Gold Coast, and Noosa. And we did this across the 2019, 2020, and 2021 holiday season. And we excluded anyone living within those 4 cities. So the questions that we asked and tried to find the answers for were, how well have the 4 destinations recovered from the pandemic? How long are visitors staying? And what destinations and points of interest are recovering best after 2020? And with the data, we were able to see that 54% more visitors happened to stay in those locations in 2021 versus 2020, even though 12% below pre-pandemic levels. So we weren't seeing what we saw in 2019, but we were seeing a huge increase over 2020. And there was a 57% increase in unique visitors staying over 4 weeks at destinations in 2021 through 2022. So again, that mid-December to the end of January is what we considered the holiday season. And then points of interest that recovered best included those that were family friendly, appealed to urban tastes, or included outdoor experiences. Another case study that we did was we looked at the Las Vegas Convention Center, and then we looked at visitors to the convention center and what they were doing while they were in Vegas. We made sure that we removed anyone who actually lived in the Las Vegas MSA, so really focusing on visitors only. What we did was we studied the time period between January 5th and March 24th of this year. And some of the conventions that were happening during that time frame were the National Automobile Dealers Association, the Consumer Electronics Show, which is huge. And then I didn't know this even existed, but laughed a little bit because I was so excited. The International Pizza Expo of 2022 happened in that time frame. So questions that we asked ourselves were, where did visitors to the convention center stay? Did the convention goers shop while they were in town? And what did convention goers do for fun outside of just going to the convention? So the top 4 hotels that convention goers stayed at were within a block of the convention center, so easily walkable. 1 in 4 convention attendees visit a shopping mall while in Vegas, with the top mall being the Grand Canal Shops, which is also one of the closer ones to the convention center. 20% of the convention attendees actually visited the Eiffel Tower viewing deck, and the top Cirque du Soleil show was Mystery. I still need to see that one. Another case study that we did for a specific client was for the Palm Springs greater area. The questions that they asked using our data was, where are visitors to Palm Springs coming from? How to best deploy marketing for maximum ROI. So there's that question again that I'm sure all of you have. And then how to adapt to the challenges of the pandemic. And with the geolocation data that they used from NEAR, they were able to see which new routes to add to Palm Springs International Airport, reaching record passenger numbers for the last 10 months. In fact, I'm in Indianapolis and we have a direct flight to Palm Springs for about half the year. So I can attest to the fact that the airport is very busy. And then we also were able to show them that they were validated for top overseas markets when they were focusing on the UK, Germany, France, and Australia. We also saw that the growth in leisure segment made up for the lack of business travelers during the pandemic. And business travelers usually make up about 40% of visitors. So it was great to have that piece of it filled in with the leisure segment. Another fun one that we did that I was surprised to see and excited to see was our study on Japan's Golden Week. So Golden Week in Japan is a series of 4 holidays that are closely spaced together, and they're observed at the end of April and the beginning of May. The holidays, if you were curious, are the Showa Day, Constitution Day, Greenery Day, and Children's Day. And we looked at Golden Week for 2022, and then the week before and after as our comparison. We looked at several POIs, so over 20 POIs, points of interest. They included zoos, theme parks, tourist destinations, and beaches. So really hitting all of those top tourist attractions. And then the questions that we asked were, what destinations and activities were popular during the Golden Week holidays? What changes in activities were seen during Golden Week versus the week before and after? And our data showed that out of places studies studied, zoos and theme parks attracted 60% of total footfall during the Golden Week holidays. Sorry about that. Visitors to Legoland, Japan increased 48%, and Tokyo Disneyland increased 30% versus the week before. Zoo Asia had a almost 50% increase in visitors, and Fuji Safari had a 29% increase in visitors compared to the week before. Beaches saw a decrease in visitors during Golden Week, and it was not a surprise as it was raining for most of the week. So another good example of how multiple pieces of information can tie together. If you only looked at the mobile location data and didn't know about the weather patterns, you would think something crazy happened or that the data must be wrong. But then when you tie different pieces together, you really get that full story. And that's what we always recommend doing with mobile location data. And then the last one is one that I thought everyone would find interesting, is we did a look at the Super Bowl from earlier this year in LA. And the questions that we asked were, how much did the Super Bowl boost tourism? Where were people coming from? And what other visitation patterns did the Super Bowl drive? So we looked at LAX, SoFi Stadium, Tam's Burgers, Dale Donuts, and even more. And we did include LA residents because we wanted to see what that looked like throughout the market and not just from tourists, because as we all know, when you have a Super Bowl in town, you are probably going to be invested in some of the things going on. When it was in Indianapolis a few years ago, I made sure I was downtown and going to the concerts and all that fun stuff. So we wanted to make sure we were capturing everything. And when we looked at the data, we saw there was a 15% increase in daily visitors to LAX in the week before the Super Bowl versus the prior month, so prior being December. 108% increase in visitors from Ohio, which is not a surprise, but is super fun since it is the home of the Cincinnati Bengals, which were playing the LA Rams. And that, again, that 100% increase is versus the prior month, which was December 2021. And we saw, this is the most fun fact of all, which is why I saved it for last, because I love donuts. And there was a 284% increase in visitors to Dale's Donuts, which is a Compton landmark, which was featured in the halftime show. And it was a almost 300% increase starting in just the hours following the Super Bowl. And with that, again, had to end it on donuts. This was all of the slides that I had, but if you have any questions, feel free to visit near.com or email me. Again, my name is Kelsey Waite, but we do have a question and answer section on the webinar, so feel free to put any questions in there and I would be happy to answer since we do have some remaining time. All right, I see that there's a question that says, for a case like the Las Vegas Convention Center, is there a minimum size of event or conference that you need to have to run these kinds of reports? No, there is not a minimum, but we do always suggest the bigger the event, the higher chance of a larger sample size. But we do always say that just like regular intercept surveys, a 3 to 5% sample is going to give you what you need to do a strong analysis. But we were able to look at a full month and a half, which really helped with that analysis, but no minimum to run these kinds of reports. Kathy, do you want to read the questions for me?
I would be happy to.
Well, thank you. There's a lot, so I appreciate you guys.
There are a lot of questions here. Anne wants to know, I've piloted buying geolocation data for a large park, along with associated psychographic demographic data. It was cost prohibitive, perhaps affordable for the retail sector, but certainly not for a smaller tourism destination. Any thoughts on how to make this type of data affordable?
Yeah, so we do have self-serve options as well for our reports. We can do it on a credit base. So there are lots of different options. And again, doing larger time periods are always going to cost differently than a one-time report. But reaching out to us, there's always ways that we can chat and talk about what the pricing is for sure.
Matt says, how do you feel about geolocation data as a people counter versus a trend identifier?
Yeah, so anyone who says mobile location data is great as a people counter might be steering you in the wrong direction. We do estimations and we can use the mobile devices. Again, we usually say it's capturing about 3 to 5% of all visitors. And so you can use that to then model it and create some normalization techniques to come up with your own visitor count. But we can never say we saw every single device for any day for any time period at a specific location. So a trend identifier is by far what we lean towards most, especially when you are looking at the mix of visitors, where they're coming from, how long they're staying. It really is more important in our minds to see what it looks like over time and making sure that your marketing efforts are changing. Like that they're actually working and changing the trends when you're looking at a larger destination. For points of interest and special events, I think being able to see that sample size and be able to say, I know where people are coming from. I know where the people we saw are going, and doing those kinds of trends versus I know that there were 517 people that came on Tuesday, July 4th.
Why would or should we use near directly versus an intermediary like Zartico or Symphony?
Yeah, so Zartico and Symphony and several of our other partners, I showed you a slide earlier, they are all great to work with, and we always recommend asking questions. So those questions that I showed before, making sure that you are getting exactly what you're looking for, because all of our vendors and us included in that do different services. We answer different questions. We have different methodologies. Even though they use our data, everyone kind of puts a secret sauce on it. So I just suggest reaching out to all the vendors, asking those questions, reaching out to us and seeing what we might suggest as well.
All right. What is the implication of recent privacy changes to iOS and Android?
Yeah, so there definitely is some implications to that. As we all have seen on our own cell phones, we're getting asked all the time about can we do cross-app tracking? And that is really for marketing purposes and not so much for the mobile location data ping side of things. But we do take it into consideration. Again, everything has to be opt-in for us on the app itself. And like all of these privacy things never just come out of the blue. There's always news stories and legal arguments and laws that go into place. And so there's always something that is an indicator. One of the things with NEAR is that we are always looking at that, always gathering news sources. So when we did see a change to the iOS, we saw a drop in data pings for about a month and a half, but we were already gaining new sources and cleaning out all of those pings and making sure that the news sources were accurate and really worthy of us sharing that data. And so we're already back and above where we were when we saw that slight dip with the new iOS changes.
Okay. The next person says, I'm curious about the requirement of using opt-in data. What percentage of mobile phone users opt in versus those who don't?
Yeah, so it's really more the apps versus the people. So when you think about opt-in data, you don't have the weather app and say, I don't want the weather app to know where I am. That's not very helpful. It doesn't really give you the insights that you're looking for. Like, why would you download the app if it can't tell you the weather where you are? So it really has more to do with the apps than the people. There will always be applications that you need to have your location shared on. So if you're thinking like Yelp or like Hilton, different things like that, where for your key card to work on the door and the Hilton app, you have to have your GPS on and opted in for that. So thinking of it in terms of what apps versus what people, there's going to be a lot more opportunity to get that information when you're looking at app pings.
Can you make the same analysis for Canada or destinations like Quebec City, for example?
Yeah. So that's a great thing about NIRS data, and I can't speak to everyone who doesn't use our data, but I know every one of our partners, and us included, we do have location data for all of the world. The only place that we are limited is China and Chinese devices, just because of all of the legal issues there, and that the government basically owns all of the telecom and all of the information that goes through those devices. But other than that, we have device information from around the world for around the world. So it's not just we see Canada devices in the US, we see France devices in Canada. So we're able to do that globally, both directions.
All right. You may have already answered this question, but how does NIRS source their data?
Yeah, so we source our data through hundreds of thousands of apps. We actually partner with a lot of companies that collect this data as well. So we have tons of sources. We're always going through them and checking to make sure that the data quality is still there over time, and just constantly going through that method of cleaning and checking and triple checking the data sources. But beyond that, we actually owned several Twitter related apps. And so that was kind of how we started collecting information and realized, oh, we can do this on a broader scale. So we own apps, we purchase data from other app providers, and then we actually do digital advertising and mobile ad placement. So on like connected TVs, if you have a Hulu account, but you don't want to pay the extra no commercial pricing, the commercials that you see on Hulu, those are actually connected TV ads. And some of those can come through us, as well as your ads on a mobile app. And with that, all of the advertisers and app companies who are running marketing campaigns for those apps are constantly sending information saying, oh, you should buy ads, or you should place ads on these 4 million devices right now. And so we get that information on where they are, we get the information on what device it is, and then we can tie it back to where we've seen those devices in our other data sources as well. So we're getting it from all over the place. I know that was a very long-winded answer, I'm sorry, but we get data from sources, we get data from our own apps, and then we get data from marketing companies as well, as we're trying to place our ads.
All right. Are the samples weighted or unweighted? If unweighted, how do you recommend using counts or percentage?
Yeah, so with NIRS data specifically, we always want it to be as clean as possible, because again, we send it out to different companies who then again have their secret sauces. They weight the data themselves. If you want them to, ask them to. They all have their different methodologies. We do provide information on how to normalize and how to weight data. And we've done it for some companies as well, where we have our annual monthly subscriptions that go out. We have done weighting ourselves and being able to send that out to them if they've asked. But we always recommend looking at it holistically. And so being able to say, well, I saw 40 California devices, and that's compared to 60 from Indiana. Okay, those 40 devices from California, that definitely shows a smaller mix from Indiana residents, because California is what, like 6 times the number, if not more, of Indiana residents. So we try to keep it as clean as possible. That way you can weight it and you can do those analytics that make sense to you. We don't want to skew anything, but we can weight it if you ask. And we do walk through that methodology together to come up with the best solution.
What are some of the challenges that you and other data sources are facing in terms of device volume with iOS 14.5 and other privacy moves?
Yeah, so I think that was kind of asked in the previous question. So for us specifically and the partners that we work with, because we send the data out, we are always adding new sources, making sure that we have enough where if one app just suddenly stops working or a privacy law changes in one country instead of the rest of the world, that we are well prepared and we have a backup of data, and that we have so much that it will be a very minute change in the overall numbers.
All right. What constitutes a ping for near? Is it a matter of time, a device is in a geofence, a number of pings, a number of apps that have to ping inside the geofence?
Yeah, so that's the fun thing with our data, and especially in the tourism side, is that everything is customizable. So a ping for us is just when we see a device go through a GPS signal, we get it sent to us. So if someone is on the weather app as the same time they're on a food app, we might get both of those pings, but we'll make sure that we say what time stamp we saw them, where we saw them, what point of interest they were in. So a ping for us in general is just anytime we see that phone. But on the tourism side, what's really fun is that we can define what a visitor is. So we can say, we're only going to look at devices and pings that we're seeing within so they have to be in our location for 4 hours or more for them to be considered a tourist. If they are there less time, we don't want to see them at all. They could have just been driving through. We can't guarantee that they stopped, can't guarantee that they did anything within our market. Then we can also compare that to overnight visitors. We can say, again, I'm just going to keep using Indiana because I live here. So we can say, I want to look at only people who live outside of Indiana. I want to look at people who are in my drive market. So I only want to see visitors that are coming from Chicago, Detroit, Louisville, Nashville, Cincinnati. I could go on. But the fun thing is that you can really customize that. So yes, a ping to us is anything, but it doesn't have to be that for you. We can really define it however you want.
Okay, regarding the Chinese devices you mentioned, does that mean your data does not include Chinese mobile phones and devices?
So yes and no. So we can get the Chinese devices when they are on Wi-Fi outside of China. It is just a lot tougher for us to get the devices within China. And if they're not on Wi-Fi or they don't have a SIM card that they purchased internationally, we usually do not get them. So that is the one piece that is a little bit tougher for us to get. But we do have some, they just have to, there's a few other steps that go into the process for us to collect it.
Okay, and the last question that we have, how do you identify and fight against bad actors who are creating false clusters of devices?
Yeah, so we have a team that's literally all they do is scour the data. And so in one of my earliest slides, I kind of talked through how we clean the data ourselves. So we are already looking for clusters. We're already looking for pings in the middle of Antarctica or the middle of the ocean. And those systems are already in place and just automatically clean and push those out. However, we do have a team of engineers that are then looking into certain markets, looking across the globe to see if there are any grid lines or what we call hot circles or hot spots, because there definitely are apps that just want to make money because they want to sell data, even if it is completely bogus and there's somehow 700 devices seen in the exact same lat long. We're going to clean those out, but those longer term bad actors that are able to kind of do that across the world, we catch those because of our team that is specifically looking for it. And then we do always let our partners and our clients know if we catch something like that, and we are always transparent about what that will mean for your data, and hopefully nothing because we catch it in advance.
All right, and can you share some unique ways destinations have used this data?
Yeah, so one of my favorite ways is, there's two. I'm a big fan of looking at events and being able to say, we saw a mix of residents versus people who were living within 100 miles versus people who were living within 200 miles. Where did they go before and after the event? Were we seeing them stay at specific hotels? Were they going to restaurants nearby the event space, or did they venture out a little bit more? Which is definitely a question for conventions and things. It's definitely a big question for conventions, as people are like, why did you spend so much money and market for these people? They don't come to us, and being able to say, yes, they do. And yes, we do have residents that attend this event, but we have a 30% mix of people who stayed overnight, and they stayed for 5 days instead of 2 days because the event was here. So that's one of my favorites. But a unique one that I have seen recently is that cross-visitation in terms of the full market itself. So we've had several clients who are either state level or they are city level. So at the state level, I want to see if people who live in Marion County are going to Hendricks County. And I want to see if visitors from out of state are going to 4 or 5 counties or different regions. Again, we can customize it. So there are states that prefer looking at regions instead of counties, because again, Indiana, we have like 97 counties. So that might not be the best use of the data sets, but being able to say regionally, where did people go and in what order for both residents and for visitors. And then we have one client who uses it for different neighborhoods. So they have a downtown core where it's like, we know basically everyone comes here because we have an airport downtown, and then we have an airport like 20 miles outside that has constant train service to downtown. But we want to see if we have an event in a neighborhood, I don't know, 1.5 miles away from downtown. Are people going there? And if they are, what points of interest in that neighborhood are they going to if they stayed downtown? Versus, okay, I want to see what points of interest people went to in this neighborhood if they stayed on the lake instead of downtown. So being able to do that cross visitation and going back to the stakeholders in those neighborhoods and saying, yes, our marketing efforts, when we placed an ad telling people who went to a certain event, hey, check out Albany Park, even though you were downtown, and seeing if people who saw those ads or went to that web page actually then went to Albany Park. I think that one's my second favorite and very unique in being able to track those ad views versus neighborhood travel, and then yeah, the order of events that they took.
Well, I think that's all of the questions. Those were some great questions.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, and great presentation. Thank you, Kelsey. The presentation has been recorded, and it will be emailed. The link will be emailed out to all TTRA members. Non-members who have joined the webinar, if you'd like a copy of it, that is available for purchase. Or, as we mentioned before Kelsey started, you can become a TTRA member and you can get it for free. So consider that as well.
Highly recommend becoming a member, just so you know. Great content always, great events. Highly recommend being a TTRA member if you're not already. My plug. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.